So I had a special request to go over distributing that has a negative number outside the parentheses. So I'm going to do a couple examples of problems that have that negative. So looking at this, let's look at our first example. We have a negative 4 outside the parentheses. So I'm going to start by circling that number, including the sign. And I'm going to draw arrows to both of the numbers inside the parentheses. That serves as a reminder that that's what I have to multiply. So now looking at this, I know that I have to do negative 4 times 6x. Well, 4 times 6 is 24. And I know that a negative times a positive is a negative. So that it's going to be 24x. Now if I look at this, you should know by now that when you see a subtraction sign, that's the same thing as adding a negative. So now I've got a negative 4 multiplied times a negative 2. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive 8. And that's the answer for that one. The main thing I run into you guys having trouble with is that a subtraction sign is the same thing as adding a negative number, which is what I changed here. So let's look at this problem. I'm going to circle my outside of the parentheses, which is negative 2, and it needs to be distributed throughout the parentheses. So that negative 2 is going to be multiplied times that 3y. A negative 2 times 3y would be negative 6y. Now negative 2 times 4, remember a negative times a positive is a negative, would be negative 8. Now let's look down here. Before I start, I want to make this into an addition problem, because sometimes it's easier for me to organize my thoughts that way. So as of now, it's a subtraction problem, but remember what I showed you up here. A subtraction problem is the same thing as adding a negative number. So I'm going to change this subtraction to an addition sign and make that 1/2 negative. Now I'm just going to go and do my steps like I've shown you before. So this negative 3/4, I'm going to circle, and it needs to be multiplied throughout my problem. Now since I can't multiply fractions in my head, I'm going to write two separate problems at the bottom. So I'm going to have negative 3/4 times 2. Now 2 is not a fraction. So how can I make that into a fraction? Well, I put it over 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 1 is 4. Remember that it's a negative because a positive times a negative is a negative. Now I'm going to move to negative 3/4 multiplied times a negative 1/2. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 4 is 8. Remember that a negative times a negative turns positive. So then I just combine my two answers here. So I'm going to write it as negative 6/4 s plus 3/8. Sorry, I ran out of room right there. Okay, let's look at this one. I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other one and make this subtraction problem an addition problem. I do that because a subtraction problem is the same thing as adding a negative. So after I do that, I'm going to do my steps. I'm going to circle that 6 on the outside and draw arrows to all that I'm multiplying inside my parentheses. A 6 times negative 2 would be negative 12x. A 6 times negative 4, well, a positive times a negative is going to be a negative 24.